Serial predators hide in plain sight. What if technology can turn the light on? Listen to how Callisto is helping survivors connect. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss this episode. Have you ever felt something was wrong but couldn't explain it? Like the person you love was slowly chipping away at your sense of self?
Believe me, we have been there. Different marriages, but to the same man, with the same toxic pattern. But God was still working.
We're Lizzie and Deana, women of faith, survivors, and truth tellers.
Surviving toxic relationships is for any woman stuck in confusion, healing after betrayal, or just searching for her voice again.
You are not crazy.
You are deeply loved.
Hey, welcome back to Surviving Toxic Relationships with me, Lizzie and Deana. We also have a special guest. Tracy DeTomasi is the CEO of Callisto, an organization at the forefront of using technology to prevent and respond to sexual assault and harassment. With over 20 years of leadership experience in the nonprofit sector, Tracy has designed and implemented trauma-informed programs and curricula that have impacted communities both nationally and internationally. As a licensed clinical social worker, she brings deep expertise in the field of gender-based violence, offering a profound understanding of the survivor, offender, and ally ecosystem. Tracy played a key role in advancing domestic violence legislation in the U.S. and has contributed to global projects focused on prevention and advocacy. Her innovative work includes consulting on the development of tech-based tools, ranging from apps that educate users about violence against women to smartphone safety devices for sexual violence prevention, to immersive virtual reality trainings addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-sexual harassment. Tracy, we are so glad you are here. What a portfolio. And I'm really fascinated to hear and for you to share about the sexual harassment or the app that you guys have been working on. I think this is going to be great for many people to use. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here and the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. So, like your intro said, I've been doing this work for a very long time. 25 years is a long time to be doing this work, and people ask me a lot of how did I get into it, and I don't even really know. Like, there's not one moment other than I did an internship in college working with adolescent boys in a group home, and they had been neglected and abused, but also many of them were offenders. And I really got into that work, and I went to grad school and got another internship working with adolescent sex offenders. And it really shaped a lot of the work that I did, that I've done since then. And I think that one of the reasons that I stayed in this work is that when I tell people what I do, there's a pause, and then they typically say, well, I've never told anybody but. And I just started to realize how pervasive these issues were when I was in my early 20s. And it just kept me going. It kept me going of like, we have to find a solution for this. I have a gift of holding space for people and translating a lot of these complicated things about trauma and other things into ways that people can really understand them. And have a passion about doing this because I just see the impact of it.
Most definitely. That is really huge. So have you already seen the benefit of this particular program with?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So maybe I can talk a little bit about Callisto now to kind of frame the rest of the conversation. So Callisto is a national nonprofit, and we have built technology to help survivors of serial perpetrators find one another without having to publicly disclose. And I know that that is a big mouthful of information. And so I'm going to break it down a little bit. So our app is available to anybody with a .edu email address. And it's not a phone app, it's a web app. So it's just a website, callistovault.org. And if you have a .edu email address and you've been wondering, this thing happened to me, I don't even know if it's sexual assault or not, but I want to know if this person harmed somebody else. With our app, you can do that. And so You go in and you put in the state where the assault occurred, and that's because sexual assault laws vary by state. And then you're going to put in a unique identifier of your perpetrators. So your perpetrator's social media handles, email address, or phone number. Whatever you have, as many as you have, and that's what we use to match on. So our whole system is end-to-end encrypted, and so everything gets stored in the encrypted state, and nothing sits on our server, and nothing saved in plain text. And so it's very secure. And so if two people put in that same Instagram handle, let's say, of their perpetrators, there's a match. It's not like a dating site, so they're not going to be notified right away. What happens is that we get notified. The name of the perpetrator or the identity of the perpetrator and the name of the survivor are still encrypted to us because we don't want to be a list that people can sort through. We then assign that case to advocate, a survivor advocate who's trained in trauma-informed care and working with survivors, and they're protected legally under confidentiality. And they reach out to the survivors to say there's been a match. Did they want to meet? The survivor has a choice of whether or not to meet. If they decide to meet, they get to talk about what happened, and they get to learn about their options, and whether that option is filing a police report, going through the criminal justice route, going through the civil justice route, going through Title IX, whatever that case may be. And then, if it's safe to do so, after going through the risks, that advocate will work on connecting the survivor only if the survivors want to connect. And that is key. We put the survivor in the control seat every part of the way. And they get to make the decisions, whatever is best for them. So we don't investigate what happened, and we don't report to police, Title IX, or HR. We are really about empowering those survivors for them to make the best decision for them, whatever that may be. And so we let them define their healing and their justice, and we just really help give them options along the way. The technology helps them find each other, again, without having to publicly disclose, because so often, survivors use journalists for this information, and there's a lot of problems with that. One is that the perpetrator has to be somebody who the journalist wants to report about. They have to still publicly disclose at some level, even if they're an anonymous source. It's just not as protected as our system is. And there's still a lot of danger in that for so many survivors. You look at the stuff that's being thrown at the comment section of Epstein survivors, and you can still see how horrendous it is to publicly come forward and tell your story. And so our technology helps survivors do that. And I tried to get away from gender-based violence for a while, and Callisto really brought me back because it is such powerful technology that I really think that once it has widespread usage, we'll be able to make a significant impact in the numbers.
That's really impressive. So what would you say are probably the percentage of people who do want to contact other survivors? Do they find that has been very beneficial for them overall? I know you get people that just no, don't want to rehash this with somebody else, but yeah.
Yeah, I think right now it's about 50% of people who talk to the advocates want to connect with other people. We do have, we don't know a lot about the survivors who connect because it's all protected from us as well. But we have had survivors who have matched come forward and they talk to us about it. And there's one in particular that you can find the whole story on our website. But they talked about how they thought that they were the only one, that it was a significant other who, they went to a party together, the survivor got drunk, thought that her significant other was the one to take her home and be safe. And that person, the survivor, woke up in the morning knowing something was wrong and didn't know what to make of it, thought it was their fault for getting too drunk, for making the decisions that we're all told, don't do. And they matched within Callisto 2 years after the assault and realized that they were not only one other person had been assaulted by that offender, but multiple people had been assaulted by that offender. And they hadn't gone forward until they knew that they could go forward together. And I think that is really the power of our technology, is that they know they're not alone. Not only that there are other survivors in the world, but a survivor of the same person. I mean, I heard your podcast about telling your story, which is why I reached out to you, because I think that there's a different level of healing there that you can both attest to.
Yeah. It kind of sheds light on a very dark moment in a person's life, because as you're just kind of sharing, there's a lot of shame and guilt involved in certain situations like this. But then you realize when you do talk it out and you do come forward, you find that there is something about power, empowering yourself when you are able to communicate with others. It's a really huge key factor, I think, for a lot of people to come out of abuse and then a sexual assault. I mean, I kind of got little goosebumps because I was like, this is really incredible, and I can see the major impact. I can also see that it might help them with some of that shame and that guilt to know that they were not the only one. Because like you said, there's something about, there are certain things you should not have allowed to happen, but you know what? We're human. Sometimes we just end up in situations when we least expected it, and then wow, here we are, we got a sexual, assault on us. And then knowing that there's something to probably turn to is huge. Now, how would they know about it? Because, before you and I talked, we didn't know about Callisto.
Right. Yeah. And before I say that, I just want to make a comment, too, that I think is something that you said that is really fascinating, and I hear it all the time, is that we allowed things that we shouldn't have allowed. And I think that's the language that we've been given, and it's not accurate. People did stuff to us.
Yes.
It is the perpetrator's responsibility always. You didn't allow it. You were manipulated into thinking it was okay, or you were manipulated into not saying anything. And I think that is key, particularly for younger generations, that they're starting to learn that, and our generation did not at all. And I think that just knowing that for survivors is really key. Because even though I'm sure that you know that, but it's just still the language that we use. And I totally get it, and there's no judgment there. But it's that just one reframing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It isn't our fault. It isn't their fault. Mm-mm. It's not, but those are the things that are filtered through our head because we think we should have known better. I had 2 nasty divorces and both guys were just awful, but the more I talked about it with Deana and the more that things came out to light, I was like, this really wasn't my fault. There was not enough red flags that I probably could have read. First of all, I didn't know what red flags were. And I'm sure that's a lot of these victims, they don't know what those red flags look like, which is why Deana and I are doing what we're doing, which is why you're doing what you're doing. It's that whole educational component just so that we can watch out not just for ourselves, but for those that we love, because sometimes our dearest closest friends can end up in these situations.
Absolutely. And I think so many red flags don't become red flags until after the fact when you get to look back at them. But, giving you a lot of tension at the beginning of a relationship is something that we want and can be a green flag and can be a red flag. And it depends on what it's paired with.
Well said.
And you're never too old to be groomed. Never too old. Like, honestly, look at all the scams that are out there that attack seniors, go after their retirement, go after their 401k. I mean, older people get scammed all the time. And really, that's just the same thing. It's grooming, And so, we can all say they should have known better. They should have seen the signs. No. Anybody can be groomed and manipulated. There's so many different ways to do it. And we cannot, like you said, I love that, Tracy. We cannot turn around and say, well, I should have known, no, it's wrong no matter what.
Yep.
Yeah. Not making any leeway for anything to say, well, maybe. No, there's no maybes. There's a definite line that was crossed. Wow. So go ahead.
I was going to say, going back to your question of how do people find out about Callisto, I think, that's what we're working on right now and that's why I'm on podcasts like yours, and spreading the word, because it's really difficult to spread the word about resources for sexual assault, for gender-based violence in general. Our meta ads get blocked a lot of the times. People don't want to follow a social media account that's about sexual assault because it can be triggering. You want kittens and puppies and happy things on your social media, especially right now. With what's going on in the world, it's just too intense. So it really takes all of us to really spread the word. If you know somebody on a college campus, tell them about our website, projectcallisto.org, or follow us on Instagram @Callisto, or on or on LinkedIn. We have a program for Callisto student ambassadors who are volunteers that are students on college campuses that work to spread the word. And we'll give them brochures and we'll give them business cards and things and training to know about our tools so that they can work at spreading the word, because that's the best that we have is peer-to-peers. People don't want to look at my Gen X phase and say, hey, trust this resource. They want to go to their friends, and that's where they're getting their information from. And so we're really looking to spread the word about that. And it takes time and it takes energy because, again, spreading the word about sexual assault is very complex.
It really is. I don't want to say like apples for apples, but I think even sometimes what we're doing is really hard. It's not something that people go, surviving toxic relationships, emotional abuse, because it's those bruises people don't see, but they don't realize we all need to be educated in these areas so that we can be there or know the resource on hand when we know someone is in these particular situations. And I think that's the hardest part for probably you and for us. We're not just here for the people that are in it now. We're here for the long haul. We're here to educate to the point that people know right away these types of resources and where to go and what to look for. If someone's been sexually assaulted, there's probably even signs that a family member can monitor and go, you know what, let's talk.
Yeah.
I think education is key, and it's a hard one.
Absolutely. There's a lot of parents out there that notice a behavior change in their kids that go off to college. And they think, well, it's just them going off to college, they're growing, they're maturing, they don't have our guidance anymore. But there's so many behavior changes that can happen after somebody has been sexually assaulted. Their grades drop. They maybe get into drugs or alcohol or drinking more, or just really changing in their personalities. They might get overly sexual. They may develop more anxiety or depression. 34% of survivors on college campuses drop out of school. And so there's all these indicators, and a lot of people don't want to, particularly parents, don't want to ask the hard question because they don't know how to respond when they get the answer. And so maybe they don't ask it right, even if they do ask it, or don't ask it in a way to allow that space of healing and that space of understanding. In that space of rawness. And it's complicated. Also, a lot of survivors don't even identify that they've been assaulted until years later, when they can really look back at it and they have more maturity. When you're 18, you're like, oh, well, that was my fault and it was a bad sexual experience. And then you look back and you're like, no, that person took advantage of me. And I always say took advantage of me in quotes, because that's code word for groomed you to sexually assault you. They looked for your weaknesses and they preyed upon your weaknesses. And we don't want to acknowledge that we can be victims. We all want to be strong women, strong people. And when there's somebody that has done something to you, we feel like, we're a victim and we're weak. But victimization cannot be controlled. Again, it is the responsibility of the perpetrator, and they're going to do what they want to do. There are things that we can do to minimize our risk, and that's all. And those don't always work.
Right. Wow. That is so spot on, because it's getting past those mental barriers. I am a victim. I did go through this. And so I know what you're doing is really impactful for these young adults. Do you get a lot of high school students as well, or is it mostly just college?
It's just college right now. We don't allow anybody under 18 to use our technology because of mandated reporting laws. And so that's a challenge. We've had a lot of high schools ask to have access, and we haven't tackled that big legal issue at this point. Maybe someday we will, but right now we haven't, considering 21 million people have access to our technology, and we still need to get everybody to know about that. We are looking to expand beyond college campuses, and we are actively pursuing funding and actively pursuing opportunities to expand beyond college campuses. And so, sign up for our newsletter to get updates about that. Most likely it'll happen, and the pilot will start in 2026 is our hope. but it still might be a little bit too early to decide the date, but that is really our hope. Because we know that sexual assault is well beyond college campuses. It is everywhere, particularly anywhere that there is a power imbalance, whether that is a religious institution, a government institution, academic institution. There are power imbalances everywhere, and that just leads to higher rates of sexual assault, particularly by serial perpetrators.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, Tracy, go ahead, Deana.
Sorry, Liz. So you mentioned minimizing risk. What can somebody do to minimize their risk? Are there some actual things that, that are actionable, I would say? They can maybe minimize the chances this could happen to them.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the things that we talk about as prevention are really minimizing risk. So things like covering your drink at a bar, right? Using the buddy system. Those things are like, being aware of your surroundings and knowing what you're getting into. But again, I think that really just minimizes your own individual risk. And you can't keep your drink covered the whole time. Being aware of your surroundings, it's hard to maintain your awareness of your surroundings and having fun at the same time, because those are often two different parts of our brain of scoping for the bad to happen and then just being able to enjoy the good. While there are things that you can do, perpetrators are really excellent at finding their victims. Again, I started my career as a therapist for adolescent sex offenders, and they know how to find them, and they know how to prey upon them. And that's strong language that doesn't always come up so strong, right? It's the person who maybe is a little bit further from home, who maybe grew up in a religious institution, that they don't know enough about sex, that they're still curious about it, but not wanting to do anything about it, but might have more stigma or shame around it, so aren't going to tell if something happens because they feel more shame. It's the people that are a little bit more naive, the person that doesn't know how to drink, and so you've drank alcohol for the first time in your life and you don't have a tolerance and you don't realize you can't do 5 shots in a row for the first college party, And so it's understanding what alcohol does to your body could be a way to reduce risk. But again, I think that all of those things are also stuff that we use to blame victims, and victims use to blame themselves. I drank too much, it was my fault. I flirted too much, it was my fault. I wore something too short, it was my fault. There are people that are raped and sexually assaulted no matter what they wear, and there are people that wear this of clothing who have never been raped or assaulted. So that isn't something. And so I think that reducing your risk is really challenging. A lot of it is just being really self-aware and learning what your patterns are and how people might manipulate those. But I've been doing this work for a very long time, and I'm still not great at it, of picking the wrong relationship and all of that. And so I think it's so complex to tell somebody of how to reduce their risk and then what happens if something happened, And so I think the reducing of risks is finding out who's at risk of perpetrating, and we should look at reducing their risk of perpetration rather than a risk of us being victimized when we cannot control the behavior of the person that's perpetrating us.
Oh, that's a really good point. It's a very, very good point. Yeah. I know for Lizzie and I, both marrying the same toxic narcissist, we kind of come to that question too of how can other women prevent not finding a narcissist and getting with them and having a relationship with them. And really, there's a few quality things that you can do for sure. And a lot of them is, not getting serious right away and not being alone with them right away and connecting immediately. But like you said, I think awareness has got to be the best key, because I agree, just making sure that there are less people that do this stuff, because they're going to be found out. There's just too much out there. People, less victims, I guess. There need to be less victims. Because you're right, these people can spot a victim a mile away. A victimizer will look for a victim, and they're good at it, just like you said. So, yeah, thank you, Tracy. That's helpful.
Yeah, and I think having a place that they can open up, or hopefully open up, or find a connection with somebody else, or to know they're not alone, it just sheds light on that very darkness. And just, that's what we need, is just more light. Because they're saying that, any perpetrator, when they do their abuse, they want to keep everything in the dark and in secret. And then because of our own guilt and shame, we keep it there as well. So,
yeah.
Wow.
And I think collectively we can educate others. And that's something that we can do to reduce our own risk. And like, think that that's what you all do. And that this podcast is to really try to use the experiences that you've had to educate others. And sometimes it's educating others about what happened to them to reduce their own shame and their own stigma. Right? But then it's like, let's collectively flip this script for the next generation. Let's collectively say of like, let's not look at the risk for us, but what's the risk for the perpetrator? There's all these risk assessments, and they're all geared toward how do we not get assaulted? And if you really think about that, how do you not get assaulted?
Good point.
It's how do you not assault should be the question always.
Yeah.
And treatment for perpetrators is effective. At least for adolescents, there's a lot of different ways to hold perpetrators accountable that we have to have accountability. And we have to stop blaming victims, and so that's why there's this push to believe women and start by believing, because if you start that, then there's more likely that the perpetrator will be held accountable. And there's also less harm that will be done to the victim. And if 90% of sexual assaults on college campuses are committed by serial perpetrators who on average offend 6 times while in college. And so if we can find them, we can prevent the risk for all of us collectively, easily, by just holding them accountable. And if they know that there's a level of accountability, they're less likely to perpetrate because they know that they're going to get caught. And perpetrators offend when they know they're not going to get caught. And they're typically really charismatic people, typically men, and so they're really charismatic and they have controlled the narrative. And so when the victim or survivor speaks out, there's a lot of questions because how could this really charismatic man do this thing? It's all part of the culture and it's all part of that narrative that we have to educate around and have to flip that script.
Right. Wow. I can't wrap that up any better. Deana, did you have any other questions?
No, I don't. But Tracy, thank you so much for what you're doing. I know this is a really small, it probably feels like a niche thing right now, but I know that it won't be because this is so important and so valuable. And finally, somebody found at least one tool that can be absolutely life-changing, for both sides. For the victim and for the victimizer, like you said, once they know there are tools out there and they're going to get caught and people are being empowered to speak out immediately, there's going to be a lot less of this going on. And so I can't thank you enough for what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. If this episode brought up something for you, you don't have to carry it alone. Learn more about Callisto at projectcallisto.org and consider reaching out to a trusted advocate or local resources for support. Please share this episode. Awareness does save lives.